young people have powerful things to say if you get out of the way, or you find the right moments to coach and push and challenge. And I think we've historically thought of challenge as like more of things, more problem sets, more memorization, more flip cards and note cards, and ability to do what AI and technology is taking over. Like, I think our idea of what it makes someone intelligent, when kids describe that student so smart, or like when they think of their own identity, we have to start shifting what that means. And that's where storytelling to me is this beautiful intersection of like dignity, opportunity, agency.
Welcome to episode 9 of the Unrulr podcast, where we talk to great educators and people embarking on bringing joy and visibility to learning communities. I have the honor of talking to a colleague, co-conspirator, collaborator, and just great friend of mine, Annie Makela. Annie is the founding director of the Scott Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Hillbrook School, a really incredible learning community near San Jose, California. Annie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Aaron. It's so fun to be with you today.
Annie, it's been a privilege to get to collaborate both with Unrulr, but also just like in envisioning what social entrepreneurship looks like in schools, not only with teenagers and children, but with adults as well. I wanted to start this conversation by asking you what your philosophy of education is.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that this is the question we're starting with, and I can't wait to hear your answer too. So I'm guessing we're going to actually have very similar answers. You've already used a lot of the words that I would have used and will use, and I will also just share this question has been so simple, and like, what is education? I feel like is something that I've just been marinating a lot on, and being willing to be like really wrong in some ways and surprised about the answers that come to mind. And I don't know if that's like a post-pandemic thing, or if part of it is just where we are with the Scott Center launching an upper school at Hillbrook, getting to hang out with people like you that are pushing these questions in ways that I feel really excited to courageously embrace. So I guess, my short answer, the reason why I took this job at the Scott Center, and a big part of like what brings me a lot of joy, is thinking about the ways in which education is a tool for dignity, and thinking about what we owe students in education. And I use that word like owe really specifically because we've caused a lot of the problems that we're going to hand them to solve. And I used to be like, oh, I love working with the future leaders of tomorrow. And now I'm like, nope, they're already leading. They're already like teaching us so much. A first grader yesterday when we were in Reach Beyond Block at Hillbrook beautifully like shared with me, I wish I would have been documenting it on Unrulr, but just had this like very funny, beautiful, we were talking about the Kentucky Derby. So I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and our unit in our social impact class in first grade for the last couple months has been, what does it look like to build and create inclusive celebrations? And so we had designed this whole celebration for the Kentucky Derby that the first graders put together. And one of the things that we learned about is like, flowers are for everyone, hats are for everyone, pink is for everyone. And they loved, and that's such a first grade kind of sweet spot of just thinking about what it means to apply creativity with a historically really problematic cultural event, and allow them to like unpack pieces of it, but to also do it through the lens of joy and through the lens of activism, and let them learn about these incredible change makers. Diane Crum, who's, the first female jockey to race in the Derby. So many of the students could not get over that was, not that long ago that a woman was allowed to race in the Derby. But this one student, came up to me and was like, Ms. Mack, my dad used to say pink was a girl's color. It's like, oh, we know pink is for everyone. And then he just kind of looked at me and he was like, yeah, he said that about Barbies too. And, then he was like, just looking at me, and I just like looked at him and smiled and laughed and just said, Barbies are for everyone. And a couple days later, he came back to my room and he had bought a Barbie and he said, thanks for reminding me Barbies are for everyone. And it was like that simple, just kind of like, he didn't get upset. He didn't cry. He didn't run away from his dad. He just like owned that moment to be like, nope, Barbies are for everyone. Pink is for everyone. And to me, that's the sweet spot of education, is like that intersection of joy and activism that is at the heart of social entrepreneurship and so much of what we've gotten to do with you, Aaron. How would you answer that question? What is your
In a similar way, shockingly. I mean, I think for me, there's a magic in K5 where learners are curious and they engage and they soak up knowledge like a sponge. And usually somewhere in sixth grade in this journey to college, that gets destroyed, right? And grades are a part of that. I think the commodification of learning for outcomes that are predetermined by others is a part of that. And so much of our work with you and other institutions with Unrulr is just extending that joy and that curiosity and that shared love. And so for me, my philosophy of education is around community, is around authenticity, and is around learners kind of owning and having agency over that process, which is why I think we get along so damn well. Um, no,
best?
I love that. Tell me about your work at the Scott Center, about its evolution, about what we're embarking on together.
Yeah. So, I was raised by an educator and an entrepreneur, so it makes a lot of sense how I ended up in this path and in this career, and I'm incredibly grateful. Um, to have been raised in Louisville, Kentucky, where you walk out your front door and the neighborhood is full of just like children embracing on adventure in so many different ways. So my childhood was really rich with creativity, and with kind of just access to the freedoms of the world that, I really mean that, like the free things in the world that we could do, the parks, the bike rides, the laughter, the joy. And I went to incredible magnet public schools for my entire upbringing until I went to college. And so the way that, in my work now, we have to be much more intentional about teaching diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and action. That was such a rich and rooted part of my experience with school, and such a value of how I got to know my community and got to know the world. Magnet schools is something, I don't know actually how much they exist anymore. They're definitely, something that in Louisville, Kentucky, where it was a big part of how they approached public schools. But that whole mindset, that you were talking about, Aaron, with community, of like bring people from all parts of the city and make your school so magnetic that everyone wants to come there and learn, and then flip that magnet and send them out into the world so they can share and always feel like you have roots and wings. But I loved school. Like it was really cool to be smart at my school. It was really cool to like care about the world and care about things happening. And my family definitely fueled that too. Like our dinner conversations every night were always things happening in the world, and we debated and we dialogued, and it was, rich with kind of all different perspectives. And so from a young age, I think I just had this idea that like intellectual curiosity is such a critical part of
Mm,
existing in the world.
mm,
Um, and so when I started my teaching career after college, I had spent a year and a half helping to launch and build the Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship, and I'd gotten to do that as an intern. So I had this beautiful experience of like, I'm not responsible for the success of this long term, but I am able to come in and offer really big ideas and um, push the thinking a little bit in certain ways, and really learn from incredible professors and mentors running that program, and learn from them in a way that was different than being a college student. Um, so I'm really grateful to Liz and to Heather and John, who embrace student voice as a core part of the design of the Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship. And when I went to teach, I started my teaching career in second grade in Connecticut. And, when you're young and you're a teacher and you live on campus, like you say yes to everything. So I was part of the schedule redesign committee, and I was part of the after school design enrichment program, and I ran our TEDx Greenwich Country Day. And I guess what I will share is part of what I've been trying to push a little bit on with the Scott Center and with the students that I mentor and coach is like, there's been this shift of like, say no to things, boundary yourself, like stay really close to only the things that, are comfortable to you. I think the exact opposite is what we should be doing. And I don't mean that in like a burnout, do all the things, but I do mean that in like do hard things and do them with dignity, do them with curiosity, do them with people that you really want to learn from. And that's what I got to do. I got to start my teaching career with incredible second grade teachers, gifted, like to the untrained education lens. You might not pick up on the subtleties. I'm sure I didn't in the first couple years, but things that I do now, I know I am just modeling incredible education that I got to witness for multiple years as a co-teacher. And had a space to like try things. I was supported by our head of school, when I went to him and said, I want to run a TEDx Middlebury like event. And he was like, I don't know what that means. And I was like, well, it's a bunch of speakers and, they're going to come push our students to think big about the world. And he was like, okay, I think my role in this is to block anyone from getting in your way and give you a certain budget and then stay out of your way. And I was like, that's a pretty incredible leader who, allows you a little bit of space and a little bit of budget. Cause Erin, you and I talk about this all the time, like finances represents your values. So that was kind of the kickoff. And then I had an opportunity to rejoin Middlebury and launch their Center for Social Impact Investing at the grad school in Monterey, California. And California just was always this place I knew I really wanted to live and experience. And so when I got to Monterey, I immediately started working with a very different demographic, which was graduate students. And we were working in a very different geographical area as well, because we were working around the world in emerging market countries with social entrepreneurs tackling just incredible challenges. And what I started to kind of unpack that has really shaped the work and the way we think about the center at Hillbrook School, where I am now, is that when you're a graduate student and you have $150,000 in student loans and someone is telling you to go out and experiment with your career and see what's going to work and see what interests you, like such an unfair thing. So just that made no sense to me. And I hated that so many of these graduate students, when they came to our center, we'd ask them our 2 core questions, which still guide our work at the Scott Center. What matters to you? What do you want to do about it? And so many of them were like, no one's ever asked me that question. I'm sure I've filled it out in an application here and there, but I've never like had it really guide my decision making. So I became obsessed with this idea that like we weren't reaching children young enough with those questions, and we weren't giving them the time to be playful and to be curious and creative with how they might answer those questions.
And let those questions guide the rest of their learning and academic knowledge.
Exactly. I mean, like this is exactly what you and I spend our days at Hillbrook talking about, which is not only like thinking about those questions, but then seeing how they play out, really putting pen to paper, saying it out loud, like this is what matters to me, and feeling confident that like you have built a skill set and a mindset and you have a toolkit to go out and do something about it. So in my, on the weekends, I started working with this group of middle school girls and teaching a finance and an investment class, because a lot of our work and the research side was, why are there so few women in social impact investing and social entrepreneurship? And so one of my predictors, and still have yet to see it play out totally, but we have seen major shifts in the gender lens economy, was to just reach young girls at a younger age and just be like, hey, finance is a tool. You're going to need it for the rest of your life. I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make it seem accessible. And we're just going to see where this lands. It's not for a grade. It doesn't have to be for a project. You don't have to work on it every single week. And that, like, making space in education is really, I think, when I got to the Scott Center for Social Entrepreneurship, what it's all about. Like pushing a little bit of like what a schedule can look like, what a project can look like, what a grade is, what assessment is, and just starting to like balloon out some of these rigid lines that we've existed in with education for so many years, and occasionally pop them, but oftentimes not really. It's just a little bit of like, does it have to be that way for math every year? Does it have to look like that? Um, when you're doing storytelling. And so we used these 6 pillars, we called them at first, and they've evolved to be lenses because we didn't want them to exist in silos. But we have 6 pillars. Erin, you'll love them all: story, civics, design, finance, system, and agency. That's what guides our work. Those are like what I call impact academics. And, if you can see a kid find either one or two of the lenses that really matter to them as levers for making change and dig into like seeing that as a real skill set beyond the school day, I mean, there's nothing more magical than watching a kid like really find their path and be willing to like stand up for what they believe in. I don't know, Erin, what have you seen at the Scott Center that in our work together, and definitely like Unrulr has like magically made the difference of us being able to document this learning?
I mean, I've seen culture be at the centerpiece of it, right? Like, I've seen there be the needed pause and reflection for learners to actually name what they learned and to, both on a summative but formative side, be able to tell the stories of their learning. I've never seen a learning community embark on process the way Hillbrook and the Scott Center have, of getting their learners to really unpack who they are, their process as human beings, and the process of the projects and ventures they're working on. That has been incredibly exciting. And I think like it feels like a joyous startup in some ways too, right? Like we're working, with people across K-12 and people across San Jose in, and not just like redefining what a school looks like, but way more importantly in having learners be at the centerpiece of this experience.
Do you feel like when you think about the future of education, we've been debating this a lot at Hillbrook, the like horizontal versus vertical, and how much you need the horizontal piece of social entrepreneurship, social impact, DEI, justice and action work. Where is that landing for you in education right now? Where does it show up in the school day? How are you seeing schools experiment with assessment of it?
That's an awesome question. I mean, I think of those as lenses, just like you think of those as lenses. Like they can't be siloed. DEI can't be a silo. It can't just be one person's job. It can't just be one class. It has to be embedded within the framework of an institution. You have to see it in all of the different elements of the disciplines you're teaching and in the culture of the school. And it's the same thing with whatever you call it: planet, sustainability, environmentalism. Um, I think they're intertwined and interconnected. And when they're not, then it's performative. Then it's what we see across industry and across independent schools, where you talk about the work that you're doing, but oh shit, when you have to actually do it, then it gets messy. Then parents complain. Then you don't actually want to put it into practice. And so I think that's what's really interesting about not only how we're thinking about documenting it with Unrulr, but also how you all are trying to live it and embed it within your programming, right? Because the classic moment in academics is, yeah, but that's not what we do in social studies. That's not what we do in the math class. Why do I need to talk about that with our students? And I think that's where an institution determines who it is. And you're, oh man, you all are in that really interesting place of naming it too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And wanting to, I mean, I think there's this like, I was sharing this with Mike the other day. We're in this interesting moment with the field of social entrepreneurship,
Totally.
where you don't want to define it so much that you don't leave space for it to evolve, but you also need to define it enough that people see it as real. And that's where I think there's an interesting tension and like the difference. My previous work was very like quarterly, and it lived in the business finance cycle and world. Whereas education in the 9-month cycle, huge benefits of seeing something over a whole 9-month
Totally.
period.
The longitudinal way of doing it.
Totally. And then there's moments where it's like, oh, this is moving so slow.
Yeah.
I need like a little bit more hustle. I need to push a little bit faster because we're going to lose the momentum. And that tension, like being able to hold that tension of like innovation on the outskirts of organizational structure
Mm.
with like real entrepreneurial leadership being bringing that innovation to be integral to the way culture schools function. There's a lot of like really juicy moments in that.
Can I throw some TED Talk language at you?
Always just
Okay,
don't.
so this is
Hey, TED, you have to spell it correctly.
yes,
He.
I, will- I will spell it correctly. I think this is my theory of change in schools. Bear with me as it's super hipstery. Um, Documentation begets evidence. Evidence begets transparency. Transparency begets trust. And trust allows for innovation and agency in learning communities. And what we're embarking on with Unrulr as a documentation and storytelling tool, and Hillbrook as, you know, a school embarking on social entrepreneurship and learner agency, is all about that transparency and all about that visible learning. Why is that exciting for you? Like, why does that feel like we're doing something new? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're doing something that has always been done, but has kind of been thrown away, and something at the same time that feels innovative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you feel this way. Like, I feel so lucky to be part of the 0.01% of people that loves my job. When I'm spending weekends with my friends, the instinct to like not like your job, not like the thing you spend so many hours a day doing is so high. And that's never made sense to me. Like, I was bullheaded about finding a career path where I knew I could show up. Of course, there's plenty of parts of my day that I'm not psyched about, but like on the whole, I just really love what I do. I love the work. I love seeing children grow. I love watching different kinds of parenting styles and getting to see how colleagues work together and the tensions that exist in a highly collaborative school and a highly collaborative environment. I love getting to grow a team and finding people like you, Aaron, to pull in and these moments where like we really needed something and then we found it and it was like this magic happened. I truly cannot imagine the Scott Center without Unrulr now. Like, that's how embedded you and your team and your work is in our structure. But like last year we didn't even have Unrulr. So that amount of like growth and opportunity and the group of people that are focused on evolving education are the smartest people I know. They are finding this sweet integration of creativity, curiosity, activism, joy, challenge, and kids are responding so well. If you're a parent, you can't ignore that. 1 week in Argentina with us for Reach Beyond Week, and we got texts like, I haven't seen my kid like this in over 5 years. What did you do? Well, we didn't really do much, is the truth. We connected children to an amazing opportunity. We gave them space to be curious. We gave them space to play. We put them in proximity to other people's cultures and ideas. We reflected at the end of each night. We had structure to the day so they knew what to expect, but lots of open spaces for them to digest and marinate on ideas. That's what we did. And that is powerful. And as an education community, like, you can't really ignore that it doesn't feel fair that that only exists in a certain kind of school. Like, that is what keeps me up at night. I know we can continue to do this work in amazing ways at Hillbrook. We have, you know, you met Mark, he was at our full day retreat. We have an incredibly supportive head of school. We have an amazing board chair. I have this team that is just like ready to make this happen. And it continues to exist in only a small subset of schools. And so that I think is the work. Like when I think of the role of philanthropy, when I think of the role of having a school like Hillbrook, it is to do the hard work of piloting, have the difficult conversations with the people blocking you, and be ready to share that roadmap. Because I think at every single school, like teachers are the most incredible humans I know. You just will never, I mean, my sister-in-law is a doctor, she's also equally incredible, but like the career of teaching, there's just nothing out there like it. The inventors, the magicians, the nurses, like the roles, the amount of roles that an educator plays in a day, there's just, it's incredible. And so how do we give the power back to educators? That is the piece of the pandemic that is the most problematic to me, is that we took power away from educators and people started fearing really good educators who are challenging students and challenging systemic racism and challenging what it means to be part of a community. And I think, our work at the Scott Center is just beginning, because we've now built this really awesome program. We've embedded it in the school structure. We've found people that believe in it and want to support it. But our real work is like, can we bring this to other communities that don't get to do that? And then how do we empower them to find their own journey and path in it? Not to just say like, here's our thing, take it, plug and play, but instead say like, what do you need? Do you need a summer sabbatical? Okay, let's help you fund that. Do you need a TA from a university so that you're not just doing this work alone and in your head and in your brain by yourself at night? Okay, let's find a path for that. And that's the thing that like K-12 education is really slow to adopt. Universities did it decades ago. They started these centers. Almost every single really strong university right now has a center of some sort that's pushing innovation. They know they need it to stay relevant, to stay connected to young people. K-12 schools have to have these centers, or they have to be given space and money and time to think about the future. What do you
No,
think?
no, I mean, I think that's why documentation and storytelling are so important. Like, I think that's why taking learning lessons from communities, that's why allowing learners to be the documenters of their learning and to have a modality that's important in that space is so vital. Like, and I'm not just speaking for Unrulr, I'm talking about my experience in education as well. Like, there's a power shift. It's like that Ron Berger book, An Ethic of Excellence,
Yeah.
right? When our learners' artifacts of excellence are on display and they're the teaching tools, that's game changing. And we're not the sole purveyors of knowledge. It's the same thing for teachers when they're able to document their process. It's a conversation we were having the other day, right? Like when we are documenters of moments that can be extrapolated and can be hugely influential in how districts teach and how other learning communities build. I mean, I've always been influenced by Humans of New York. Like I've always been influenced by these moments of nostalgia and human connection that come from stories. And I think that's what learning is devoid of, right? Which is so weird. I became a teacher in Hawaii, like Jack, um, and my other colleagues, like at Unrulr and across my experience in education, have always believed in the power of story in ourselves and in our communities. And I think like modern day education has just destroyed that. And so I think so much of what you and I are doing is re is making that a thread that carries through all of those spaces.
It's an interesting like moment too for us to think about. We've made a little bit of a shift at the Scott Center around like what we see as literacy, and I actually think there's an argument to be made that like equity and impact literacy is a critical part of great storytelling, and that there's all these spaces where you don't really know where a story is going to end up, and that's sort of the beauty of it. And yet you also always know where the story is going to end up, and that's also the beauty. And I don't mean that in like a philosophical way. I mean that in like a young people have powerful things to say if you get out of the way, or you find the right moments to coach and push and challenge. And I think we've historically thought of challenge as like more of things, more problem sets, more memorization, more flip cards and note cards and ability to do what AI and technology is really just taking over. Like I think our idea of what it makes someone intelligent, when kids describe that student's so smart, or like when they think of their own identity, we have to start shifting what that means. And that's where storytelling to me is this beautiful intersection of like dignity, opportunity, agency,
And identity.
and identity.
Yeah. Well,
And
I mean,
it's
go for it. Sorry.
no, go.
I mean, what for people that are creating centers like yours or programs like yours, what in your experience, what do you wish you would have known as you were building this out? What like big kind of tip do you have for them?
Oh, there's so many things, which is like, um, yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to make change in education, even under the very best circumstances. So, A, be gentle with the timeline. And I think like be willing to do things even when people tell you they won't work or have said no, if you believe deeply that like you can figure out a path forward. I don't mean that like break the rules or spend money you don't have. I mean that more in like we all sit and like with ideas in our head that can be hard to articulate. And maybe this is the role of Unrulr. I wish I would have had Unrulr 7 years ago when I launched the center so that I could do the storytelling visibly. Because, you know, as much as I love being around people and I feel really frustrated by the like introverted, extroverted divide, I'm like, I don't know, I'm moments of introversion, moments of extroversion. I think we do a big disservice to kids when we tell them, you're this way, you're shy, you're brave, you're loud, you're a great leader. Because I think when you're launching a center or in any sort of leadership role, like you're all of those things and you need space to be all of those things. Like there were days when I just really needed to like be alone for 3 days to finish a financial model. And there were days when I was alone way too much because I felt like no one was helping me, no one was supporting me. Don't you see this thing that I'm trying to do? And so I think just like recognizing, you know, one of the tools that we teach as a result of like a lot of hard work in the first couple of years is this S curve of growth. That like you're going to have these phases of like ideation, and you got to find the right people to join you in the right phase. Because if you bring someone who is like too lawyer, kind of very rigid, too early in the design, both of you are going to be frustrated. But you do need to like be moving up the S curve. I think sometimes people get, including myself, like we get these really big ideas and we want to just like keep thinking big, and we miss the moment to like really hone in on what the next step is for progress. Or we're so quick. I remember, you know, my first year, I was so quick to like move on to the next thing that I didn't document a curriculum, or I forgot to like do the recap of the final class with the sixth grade Money Matters. Um, and so if that is the case, like know thyself. I know I'm like quick to move on. So I was really specific when I finally got my second hire of the skill set that I was looking for, and balancing out the big ideas, which you do need. And I want to like make a plug for people in education with big ideas. It is a skill set. It is not like a fun thing on the side where you're throwing spaghetti at the wall. It is a true skill set. We need you. Please stay in education and find your collaborators that can turn those big ideas into real impact and move away. You know, I think one of the amazing parts of our work with the Scott Center happened when we joined forces with the DEI team. So we hired a director of DEI, Gully, and it was clear to me like either we're going to become competitive and we're going to be the like business financy people, and then we were going to have this DEI social justice side. And that was going to be like the worst thing possible for our school. If those two spaces become competitive, then we have lost the vision, the mission of the work.
They have to be intertwined.
They have to be intertwined. And we got so lucky that that collaboration was amazing and beautiful, and even really then eventually turned into a full board committee. So we had all the systems aligned working together. But what that also did is it pushed me and my team and really like our school to think about the problematic sides of social entrepreneurship, to also be a critic of it, like live within it and also be open to the critique that it's probably not ever going to feel like we are on a perfect path, but that shouldn't like keep us from having the tough conversations and doing the reflection of what we want for students, our community, and the world. And so, those are some of my favorite work days, are the ones where we really try to understand what does impact on people and the planet mean, and how do we move from just talking about DEI to doing something about it, the justice and action arm. And watching students, that really struggled with our DEI work in their early years find their path and like embody it and own it, that I think is one of the most powerful parts of launching the center and seeing students year after year, as opposed to just working in certain grades. You see that progress, you see some of that like fear shed, and they start really realizing that like caring about the world, caring about people, caring about the planet is not only like really critical and really important, it's also really fun. Running a beach cleanup with your best buds and then going to get donuts and iced coffee on a Saturday, it's a pretty awesome way to spend your morning. That's my take, at least. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a solid take. I think that when you see yourself in school and when you see yourself in learning, you're much more likely to throw yourself at it. And when you feel a sense of belonging, when you think that your learning and your growth benefits yourself and your community, it makes it so much easier to be there, right?
Yeah.
What's your in closing from this beautiful conversation, what's your clarion call to action? Both for educators and for heads of school.
It might surprise you what mine is. It just came to me as you said that. So I guess my hot take right now is that we need to move back towards this society where a village is raising children. And I say that like knowing that I have a job and a title that allows me to like reach many kids in a day. But there is nothing more inspiring to me than watching a parent of another kid take an interest in a different child's project.
Oh, so cool.
Like that moment when it's not your parent and it's not your head of school and it's not your teacher, but it's someone who sees something in you and names it for you and supports you. That is when you see, I think, just this shift of like curiosity to bravery.
Yes, 100%.
So, like, who in your life, this is it, who in your life beyond either your own kids or the kids that are in your class or the kids at your school can you take an interest in supporting, mentoring, just showing up and doing it in an authentic, like, way that starts to crack open, like, who is raising children in the world. That's what I would say, because I've seen it so many times, small things, and this like individualized society, like that's not the world that I was raised in. Kentucky has a lot of problems, but Louisville was like a place where you ate dinner at the house where you were at 8 o'clock or 7 p.m. Whatever time you were there, you ate the dinner that was served with the people you were with. And there was such a deep commitment to one another and raising like our neighborhood together, raising our school together. Once that happens, like that is powerful, and people don't fall through the cracks with that kind of society and that kind of culture and community. What
Hell
would
yes. Hell yes. I mean, like, it's community is learning, learning is community. Like, it's about the relationships, and it's about the connection we have with each other. Where this is a beautiful conversation and just a really wonderful way to close it out. Where can people find you? Where in the digital world can they connect, and how do they learn more about your work?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have a microsite webpage, scottcenterse.org. We have an Instagram handle, Scott_Center. Um, we have a Twitter page, we have a LinkedIn page, we have the Hillbrook website, but mostly I would just say, we're a center of people. One of the things we didn't do was invest in a fancy building. We invested in people. So if you want to get to know the Scott Center, get to know the people. My colleagues, Vanessa Fernandez, Anne Maloney, Young Ha, you, Aaron, as our entrepreneur in residence, but then also my colleagues that are really embarking on an incredible entrepreneurial endeavor, launching an upper school in downtown San Jose, Mike Peller and Mark and Shannon and others. It's a really exciting moment for Hillbrook. And one of our goals is that we're going to be able to share this learning and this opportunity to think differently about the upper school experience and to think differently about what education can be for the long run, like beyond just getting you into a college. What does it mean to be a lifelong learner? We're going to have an event in the fall. I hope people will come join us. And then we do, if you're in the Bay Area, or if you want to partner with us and you're not in the Bay Area, our most powerful tool with adults right now is this civic dinner model, where we ask 3 core questions in a small setting, and it's about 10 to 12 people, and it's a structured, facilitated dinner. And we've been expanding those dinners just to get to know our community and to get to know people better. So if you're ever in the Bay Area, reach out. But definitely any opportunities for partnership. If you're trying to launch a center at your school, we're happy to chat with you. If you're interested in bringing social entrepreneurship to your school, let us know. And if you're considering Unrulr, just go do it now. Best decision you can make. I'm not paid to say that. I actually pay Aaron to come to our school to do this. So that's how much I value the tool for documentation and reflection. But more importantly, and Aaron's been really good at this, like pushing all learners to experience something collectively. And so we're going to do this next year. So you might also be able to find us on Unrulr eventually. But we're really going to commit to adults being learners alongside students at the center and think creatively about what that's going to look like.
Thank you, Annie. It's just a damn privilege to get to collaborate and work with you and learn from you. Please, please share this wonderful conversation across your social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on LinkedIn. And please amplify the work of the Scott Center and what Annie's embarking on. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of this conversation. Aloha.